Alright, I guess it's time to upset all the Andrew Lloyd Webber fans again. Cats. Where do I start with Cats? Well, Cats is a 2019 movie musical directed by Tom Hooper, and Tom Hooper's last big musical outing was the 2012 Les Mis movie, which is a movie that a lot of people don't seem to like anymore, even though it was super popular when it came out. And for me personally, I really like that movie. I think it works more than it doesn't. It's a really tough musical to turn into a movie, but I feel like Tom Hooper got some really great and memorable acting performances out of his cast, even if the musical elements are a little lackluster compared to the Broadway version. But I still find tremendous enjoyment in the staging of a lot of those scenes, in the performances themselves, and some of the big songs. I feel like it's a pretty successful adaptation, going with a more gritty documentary style approach to the filming of it. I think it works for the tone that that show presents. Andrew Lloyd Webber's Cats is a bit of a different story though. It is not Les Mis. It does not take itself seriously at all. Les Mis is a pretty serious story about the French Revolution and crime and punishment. It's based on a brick of a book by Victor Hugo about the poor and the suffering of all the people. And Cats is based on a book of poems by T.S. Eliot about cats. It doesn't really have much of a plot to begin with. And I guess to start off, I might as well tell you my opinions about the stage play Cats, which, full disclosure, I have never actually seen in person a live performance of Cats. And I do admit that that is one piece of perspective missing from my opinion. However, I have seen the pro shot that they've done of Cats from the 90s. I've listened to the original soundtrack a couple of times. I'm familiar with the plot and staging of Cats. And yes, I've seen the movie a couple of times. I saw it when it came out, not in theaters, but on streaming, because there was no way I was going to pay full ticket price to see this dumpster fire of a movie. So I caught it on streaming shortly after it came out. Then I watched it again recently in preparation for this video. And I'm sure this is a shock to nobody, but the stage play is better than the movie version. Who would have thought? But even then, I gotta say, I'm not a huge fan of the stage play. It's not my favorite. I don't think it even cracks my top 20 Broadway shows. I just can't get into Cats. And maybe if I did see a live performance of it, I would feel differently, because from what I understand, it's a really impressive show to pull off. There's a lot of great vocal performances, but more importantly, there's a lot of great dancing performances, and there's only one set. So all the actors are on stage more or less the entire time, just chilling out in this junkyard. So the actors don't really get a break in between songs. They still have to be on, they still have to be acting and performing for the entirety of the play, which is pretty rare. Usually actors go backstage, they'll get a costume change, they'll get some water, they'll just chill out for a little bit before they need to go back on, but not necessarily the case with Cats. And that's the main reason why I don't think Cats lends itself to adaptation, whether that's a movie adaptation. I don't even think the pro shot does the play justice because of all the editing. Everything is super focused on the different characters, their respective songs, and you don't really get as much of the background antics of the cats or background performances that you can experience all at the same time when you're watching a stage play. You have the whole stage in front of you, and you can kind of let your eyes wander to wherever it's going to go. So all that being said, I'm really trying to give Cats the benefit of the doubt here, because it was super popular when it was out on Broadway, and it did run for a long time. So clearly there's something that I'm missing here, because I could never really get into it. As much as something like Les Miserables or Phantom of the Opera or The Lion King or Wicked, or pick any other Broadway show. And I think that is because there's just not much here as far as plot or character. The play is very episodic. The only plot that's even discussed in the play is that all these cats are getting together and they're gonna all perform their little song and dance numbers to the head cat, Old Deuteronomy, and he's gonna pick one of them to go to the Heaviside Layer, which is basically heaven or an afterlife where they can be reborn or reincarnated into a new life so that they can have a fresh start and live life all over again. And if that sounds like a death cult, well, yeah, it kind of is. And the movie doesn't really do this plot any favors. In fact, it doubles down, and while it's hinted at in the play that these cats are all performing for Old Deuteronomy as like an audition to be chosen to go to the Heaviside Layer, the movie makes this even more explicit, which, for the sake of adding more of a plot and making the song and dance sequences seem less random, it does work. And I see what Tom Hooper was going for with that plot line. And even the idea of having McCavity be more of a villain throughout the movie, instead of just one obstacle that comes in for a little bit and then gets resolved pretty quickly, I think that decision does make sense. This is still a very tough musical to make work on film, if not impossible. And while Tom Hooper definitely doesn't help the situation with a lot of his boneheaded ideas, and we'll get to those, I just don't understand why he would take on this project to begin with, because clearly when he was making Les Mis, he was not that familiar with musical theater or the process of making a movie musical. The fact that he gave the actors free rein to just do whatever they wanted acting wise and change the tempo and timing of all their songs is just the worst decision that they could have done. They should have had a click track or some kind of guardrail to keep them on beat, keep them on track through their songs. That if they're gonna borrow some time for an acting moment, they need to give that back later in the song to make sure everything balances out, like Broadway performers do all the time. And when Les Mis came out, and again when Cats came out, movies got a lot of criticism for the live singing, saying that that was the problem. And I don't think the live singing inherently is the problem. What they need to do is keep the actors on track with the song. Otherwise, the songs just become a mess musically. And Les Mis, I think, barely kept its head above water with regards to that because all the actors were really well-trained performers, except for Russell Crowe. And with Cats, it just went off the rails in spectacular fashion. I'm not really going to go into how the movie doesn't work musically. That's not really my department. But I did want to make a note that, yeah, it is a problem, and it is noticeable to someone who's not that musically trained. The songs just don't sound that good, especially compared with the Broadway versions. The tempos are different. The actual melody through line of some of these songs kind of start and stop, or they meander. It just doesn't sound good or cohesive. It sounds like they just went with the first take they got on the day and said, okay, we don't need any more. And even just putting all that aside and being, all right, maybe people might not pick up on that. The filmmaking of this is somehow even worse, because I don't know what Tom Hooper was going for when he made this movie, because he's clearly more at home with documentary style period dramas. Like, my favorite project of his that he's ever done is the John Adams miniseries for HBO. He directed that. It looks fantastic, feels realistic to how the times were back then. It doesn't look sugar-coated, has some really good history in it. And I think that that style worked okay for Les Mis, but it is just not a good choice for Cats. If Cats ever had a chance of working, it needed to be more of a throwback to an old school Hollywood movie musical a la Singin' in the Rain or Annie Get Your Gun. One of those big, expensive looking productions with a lot of extras and costumes and sets. And to the movie's credit, the sets do look impressive. They have these giant oversized sets that are real. They actually built these. It's not just CGI. And thank goodness for that, because there's enough horrendous CGI in this movie to fill the uncanny valley. Oh my goodness, these cat designs are just the worst things ever. And I know that the musical designs look kind of silly by today's standards. They kind of look like the Thundercats if they got dressed up in leotards and leg warmers, but I feel like there are practical ways to make human performers look like cats without this uncanny valley abomination of CGI fur. And I feel like people have criticized those enough, but I needed to say it because it really is that bad, and it has not gotten better over time. If anything, it's gotten worse. But if you're really going to put your best foot forward and make this movie work, you'd have a lot less editing, a lot longer takes, wider shots, where you could see this group of incredibly talented performers dancing and doing impressive choreography. It's just that the filmmaking style is so up close and tight that you don't really get a sense of what the choreography even looks like, except for a few shots that do pull back where you can see the full body in motion. But it just should have been wider, fewer cuts, just to take in the majesty of these cats doing their performances. The other big directing question mark that Tom Hooper put in this movie is the elevation of Victoria as the main character. She's the protagonist here, because Cats doesn't really have a protagonist except for Grizabella. This is why I think Cats is not the worst idea for a musical. I think learning about Cats is actually more interesting than watching Cats, and why I would be very open to seeing it on stage someday. And that's because you could argue Grizabella is the protagonist, but she doesn't really come into the movie and sing her big I Want song until almost the end of the whole show. Which, if you know anything about musical theater and movie musicals, you know that the big I Want song happens in the first third, when we're first introduced to our protagonist. She or he, usually it's a woman though, will sing about what she wants in life. And Disney movies do this all the time. You can set your watch for when the big I Want song happens. And the classic example of this is Somewhere Over the Rainbow in The Wizard of Oz, the only song in that opening Kansas scene. So it happens really early on in the movie. You know what Dorothy wants, you know what her motivation is, and it sets up the rest of the movie. Cats does the opposite of this. It puts the big I Want song at the very end because it's a song of desperation. Grizabella has tried to communicate with the other cats, wanting to be part of their little cult or club or whatever, but she just keeps getting rejected. And now she's going to deliver her big I Want song. I want to be back in with the Jellicle Cats. And she sings it. It's super powerful. It's memory. It's a great song. It's been covered a million times. It's by far the best song in the movie, musical, whatever. And the show knows that, and it builds up to it. So all the other songs are basically your villain songs, your opposition songs, all these other cats that also want attention and want to go to the heavy side layer. So you're basically just bouncing from cat to cat to cat throughout the movie until Grisabella does her big number, and then she goes to the Heaviside Layer to be reborn. It's this big climactic moment, and then the show just kind of wraps up after that. But I think Tom Hooper didn't really understand that when he was making this movie, because he just thought that, oh, there is no protagonist. It's just all these other random cats. We need a through line. We need an audience POV character, somewhere for the cats to sing to, because singing directly to the audience, like they do in the stage play, will look kind of weird on film. And I go back and forth on this decision all the time, because conventionally, yeah, it would be weird for the cats to just stare dead into the camera and sing their songs, and even if it's edited or have wide takes and have a bit more play with the fourth wall, it is difficult to make work. I don't think it's impossible to make work. I feel like if the movie leaned really hard into that fourth wall breaking point of view play, where you make the audience feel like they're looking into this colony of cats, or you feel like there's more interaction between the audience and the characters on screen, it might actually work really well. But you need a director that's comfortable with that. And unfortunately, Tom Hooper is just not that director, so he does everything he can to make the cats talk to somebody and not the audience. And that's Victoria. And Victoria is just kind of a forgettable cat. She's in the play a little bit. She's the one that actually welcomes Grisabella into the cult, touches her on her paw, bringing her back in with the Jellicle cats at the end of the play. So it would make sense to give her a little bit more of a character in the movie version. And I feel like that works some of the time. All the songs are written for the audience's benefit. Having them all be sung to Victoria just feels a little weird about half of the time. It doesn't line up as well as you'd want it to. You'd either have to rewrite some of the lyrics to make it feel more like they're talking to a cat and not to the audience, or just scrap this idea entirely, which is probably what they should have done. The thing that really makes Victoria's characterization feel like a mistake here is the original song that they had to throw into this movie, because every musical movie needs an original song to get that Best Original Song Oscar, which this movie did not win, by the way. And here it's called Beautiful Ghosts, and it's just a waste of time, honestly. It adds nothing to the plot, it adds nothing to her character, it adds nothing to anything. It's just a weird little transitional song. But it is short, mercifully so. I think it's less than a minute long, so alright, at least it doesn't overstay its welcome. But all of these are symptoms to the fact that nobody really knew what they were doing with this movie. Nobody understood what it was musically, nobody understood really how to capture the dancing aspect of it, which is a huge part of Cats. It probably has more dancing in it than any other musical in recent memory. These dance sequences are long and extensive and very impressive to watch on stage, but in a movie, you're gonna cut it down already, because your average moviegoer just has less patience to sit through an extended dance sequence than your average theater goer. However, even with all these mistakes, and these are some deeply rooted mistakes that really do just affect almost every aspect of this movie, there are still a couple of moments that I do unironically enjoy here. For one, the Skimbleshanks the Railway Cat song. That song is great in every version, and this movie really does take advantage of what they can do with the premise of a railway cat tap dancing. And it looks great. I love a good tap dance sequence in a movie. It felt like the one scene that honestly threw back to that old school Hollywood movie musical that this movie clearly should have taken more inspiration from. And because the sequence does revolve around tap dancing, it really needed to stay on the beat. This is the one song that from beginning to end stays on tempo, stays on track. The momentum is carried from beginning to end, which isn't the case with any of the other songs, particularly the Jenny Das, the Gumby Cat song, which is by far the worst thing ever put on screen that I've seen in recent memory. It is horrendous. The CGI is at its absolute worst. You have these weird mice that have children's faces on. You have cockroaches that have human faces that just don't look good. It's pure nightmare fuel. Rebel Wilson as a cat is one of the most uncomfortable things that I've ever had to look at. Some of the imagery is just freaky. Musically, it's all over the place. The cockroaches do a little tap dance number that is framed awkwardly to begin with, but also is not synced up with the music at all. The actual tap don't match what you see the footwork doing in the CGI, which is weird because you can time the CGI to the exact frame that you want, so it should have synced up perfectly, but it's not. It's really weird, and it completely gets the Gumby Cat's character wrong. From what I understand in the play, she's a lazy cat during the day, but at night she teaches the mice and cockroaches how to be productive members of society, which implies a certain amount of love and care for these animals that cats typically eat or chase. And here they try to have it both ways, where she's teaching these animals how to do things, but she's also eating multiple cockroaches, and the mice look terrified of her, like they're performing under duress. And that is just so weird and misses the point of the whole song. It just blows my mind that it even happened. But now when we come to the third act, the movie just completely falls apart on us, because we have this side plot of McCavity capturing all these different cats, because I guess these actors didn't want to be on set for the entirety of filming. They wanted to do their few scenes and then go home, because these are fairly big names. James Corden, Rebel Wilson, Jason Derulo, Taylor Swift is in this movie for like one scene. I thought she'd be in this a lot more based on how much she was in the promotional material, and she actually does a pretty good job. The McCavity song is also really good. I'd put it around the same level as Skimbleshanks as far as quality, one of those bright spots in the movie where you're like, oh, I'm actually having a decent time here, even though I'm looking at freaky imagery and horrible CGI. It does have its moments of enjoyment. But after all these cats get captured by McCavity, they're on this barge and nothing really of interest happens. They try to have a bit of an action-y climax going on here, but the real climax of the show is when Jennifer Hudson delivers her big memory reprise, you know, the thing that everybody remembers from this show. And she gives a really solid vocal performance because it's Jennifer Hudson. You know it's going to be good, but it is distracting when you have this really off-putting design on her face and snot running down her nose. It's very easy to listen to, but a little tough to watch. So there's some dissonance there where I'm like, I don't want to see this, but you are doing a good job. The performance is good, and she's really trying to do the Anne Hathaway I Dreamed a Dream thing from Les Mis. It's not as good as Anne Hathaway in Les Mis, mainly because of all the production issues, but it is another bright spot of an actor really trying to carry this movie in an otherwise cursed production. And even so, this movie really doesn't work on a climactic level because you have your emotional climax with memory that's kind of undercut by what happens kind of at the same time with the action climax on the barge and Mr. Mistopheles getting Deuteronomy back. There's just all of a sudden a lot going on that needs to be resolved before Grisabella comes out to do her big song so that we can all go home. And that all just feels kind of disjointed. You didn't need all that. It was probably a better way to incorporate McCavity into your movie. Maybe give Munkustrap more of a role as protector of the kittens from McCavity like he had in the play. Maybe give them their confrontation, which doesn't really go down in the movie at all. That could have worked. And then on our way out, we have our final song. That's the Addressing the Cats song, and it's sung by Judi Dench in kind of a spoken word way, which for a musical that really leans hard into not singing with the audience, this is almost 10 straight minutes of Judi Dench staring into the camera and delivering this song in a spoken word way that isn't musically all that impressive and just feels like it drags on. Because when you see it in the play, there's a lot of dynamics with how it's sung, because it builds and then it goes back quiet and then builds again, and there's some dynamics there. But when Judi Dench sings it, it's all this monotone spoken word delivery. There's no interest there. And it's really off-putting when for the first time she just turns to the audience and starts talking at you like you're right there, when that was never established anywhere in this movie leading up to it. And honestly, they should have just cut this whole song, or maybe relegated to an instrumental version during the credits. Because for me, it didn't really work in the stage play either, although it is performed better there. Narratively, I think the movie ends when Grisabella goes to the Heaviside Layer after she gets chosen and she goes on her merry way. That's when the movie should just end. You should just wrap it up there. Maybe have a little dialogue scene or something, but end it. Let the people go home. They have better things to do than stare at Judi Dench as a cat with unfinished CGI and really awkward people in the background making weird faces for about 10 minutes straight before we're allowed to leave. And those are pretty much all my thoughts on Cats. The stage play is fine, I guess. It's not one of Andrew Lloyd Webber's best. I know in my Phantom of the Opera video, I got a lot of flack for calling Andrew Lloyd Webber a one-hit wonder. I don't mean that in a technical sense. I mean that in my personal opinion sense. There hasn't really been an Andrew Lloyd Webber musical that has connected with me aside from Phantom of the Opera. All of his other shows just don't really do it for me for one reason or another, and Cats is an example of that. It's not one that I get a lot out of, and I'm baffled beyond belief that this movie actually happened and the way it happened with Tom Hooper, who was not all that comfortable directing a musical the first time he did it, and just was completely out of his depth with regards to Cats. And just to wrap up, I think maybe animation actually might be the one way you could do a Cats movie adaptation and have it work on any level. And even then, it might not, because the musical is so heavily involving dance sequences. I don't even know if that would really work, but it would definitely be better than what we've got here, because Cats is a disaster and is one of the worst movies to ever come out in recent memory. Even though there are a couple good songs and there is enjoyment to be had in that so bad it's good kind of way. And I do recommend it for that. If you got friends over and you're having a party and you want to pop on a bad movie to just roast and make fun of, Cats is the one to do it. But I have to remember to you guys, what do you think about Cats? Any of it. Play if you managed to see it live. What do you think? Do you like the Pro Shop better? Do you like this movie? Even though I don't think anybody really likes this movie. But if you're out there, let me know in the comments. And if you like this video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe for more content, and hit the notification bell to be notified every time I upload a video. As always, I'm Colby. This is my nerdy talk, and I'll see you in the next video.